Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu, and I'm back with another Digimon deck profile video. So today I'm going to be taking a look at BT-06, and BT-06 offers us lots of new and powerful tools to not only build some really interesting and exciting decks, but to upgrade some current and existing decks. And today's deck that I'm going to be taking a look at is going to be a green control deck, and I guess it is kind of like a Nidhogg deck, and it's based off of like what Green Digiburst was doing before, except now we have Ancient Troymon to spice things up and add some new control elements to what the deck was already trying to do before. So I do think that Ancient Troymon is a very fantastic and powerful Digimon to include in this style of deck, and outside of that, the deck really doesn't change a whole lot, just adds a couple of new cards to interact with Ancient Troymon. So without further ado, onto the deck profile. I'm going to be running one copy of Minomon as the 5th Digitama. I do like what Minomon is doing just because he is a generic way at DP boosting our Digimon, so that way when we're attacking into our opponent's Digimon, then we're going to get a plus 1000 DP bonus, so that way we have a higher chance of being able to clear out the opponent's Digimon. But as far as the main Digitama of the deck, because we are still primarily using lots of Digiburst cards and Digiburst abilities, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Yokomon just because there is no better Digitama to play with Digiburst than Yokomon. So what this card is doing is she has the nice inheritable ability. When this card's trashed due to Digiburst ability, then we get to give one of our Digimon plus 2000 DP for the turn. So it's just another way to A, use our Digiburst abilities more meaningfully, and B, give our Digimon even more DP than what Minomon has to offer, so that way when we're trying to swing and aggress, we have an even more powerful Digimon to be attacking with, and it doesn't even need to be attacking into the opponent's Digimon. But there is just a whole bunch of very powerful Digitamas that you could be running for green, so don't feel like you're locked to just these two. Next, on to the rookies, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Goblimon. So Goblimon is just a very tempo-efficient card to be playing because he has a play cost of 2, evos for 0, and has 3000 DP, just making him a really good card to be running. And then I'm going to be running 3 copies of Argomon for basically the exact same reasons. We do run a little bit of Digizorption in the deck, so there is a really good play where we could hard play the Digimon and then use it as Digizorption fodder. And then outside of that, it's just a really good power or tempo play to just try to choke and starve the opponent because green is a more memory efficient color than some of the others, so we have very easy ways to climb up our stages and be able to play our Digimon. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Terriermon. So Terriermon is just that important of a card to be running, not only just to sit on his field because of his passive ability where the opponent can't gain memory except by Tamer effects to limit some of their actions, but because he also is a really good card to play with the Digizorption ability because we're not looking to Digivolve on top of him because we want this ability to be persistent as often as we possibly can, so that way the opponent doesn't have the availability to try to gain memory and make powerful plays happen. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Lalamon. So Lalamon is another Digiburst synergy card where she has this nice inheritable ability where when she's trashed due to the Digiburst ability, then we get to return her to our hand, so that way we can always have a rookie to be playing over and over again, especially if we are just planning on reusing Digiburst abilities, then this is just always ensuring we're going to have a rookie to be playing with. And then the last rookie of the deck is going to be 2 copies of Tentomon. So this is the starter deck version of Tentomon, and this Tentomon is really good because he's acting as, I guess, a little bit of a draw engine for the deck with his on-play ability where we get to reveal the top card of our deck, and if it's a green Digimon, we get to add it into our hand, otherwise it goes to the bottom. So there's a very high success rate for this card, allowing us to draw a card, and that's really all we're trying to gain out of the card, is just to hard play them to draw. Next, on to the champions, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Vegiemon. So I was going back and forth on whether this should be a card with an ability or without an ability, and I think for the most part, Vegiemon is just one of the best cards that we could be playing with because we don't necessarily care about the ability all too much. We just care about trying to climb as high and as quickly as we possibly can, and Vegiemon, being one of the most powerful champions in the game, makes that a very easy task. So his low evo cost just allows us to easily evo into him, and his low play cost just allows us to hard play him and not feel bad because he also has 6000 DP, which most of the time if we're going to be hard playing a card with this type of stats, it's going to cost us 6 and not 4. So the fact that Vegiemon only costs 4 just makes him one of the best, if not the best, champion that we could be playing. And then I'm going to be running 2 copies of Weedmon. So because I'm not solely 110% focused on the Digiburst ability, I feel like I need Weedmon a little bit less, but Weedmon is still a very fantastic card to run, and if you want to run 4 of him, by all means do so. I just think Vegiemon is really good in the deck still because he is interacting with Digiburst, acting as another good fodder card for when he is trashed it due to the activation of a Digiburst ability, then we get to gain 1 memory, and that could be pretty important depending on what we're using him with and what we're using him on. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Argomon. So Argomon is an optional card. You don't necessarily have to run Argomon, and the 2 Argomon that I'm running could actually just be Weedmon if you really feel like you just want to go for a more consistent build. But Argomon is really good because we are playing with Ancient Troymon, and he is a green hybrid to play off of Ancient Troymon. And on top of that, because he's also a green hybrid, he allows us to use our Tamer by having the ability to Digivolve on top of our Tamer as if it was a level 3 Digimon. So after a certain point in time, Mimi becomes less and less efficient when we don't really have anything to raise her with, or if we have too many Mimis, then we could use a Mimi to just use as a level 3 to Digivolve into Argomon to try to help push for game, acting very similar to what Blue is doing with Goblimon. And then the last champion of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Caputerimon. So this is just the deck's dedicated blocker slot. It could really be anything you want it to be as long as it just has the blocker ability. And I do like the blocker ability on Caputerimon because we are green. We want to be memory efficient as often as we possibly can. So the low evo cost for 1 is really helping us out more than evoing for 2 into something like Woodmon. But Woodmon's DP actually could matter, so you could kind of split them up or run one or the other. It doesn't necessarily matter as long as you're just running a blocker to have some form of defense. Next, on to the ultimates, I'm going to be running 1 copy of Argomon. So this is the Argomon level 5. We're only running 1 copy because we can only run 1 copy, but that's okay because having the Argomon is still very powerful for the deck because he does have the Digisorption 3 ability, so by suspending one of our Digimon in play, this could even be the Digimon we're using to Digivolve up into him, we get to reduce the Digivolution cost by 3, making him essentially Evo for 0, and that's still just very, very powerful, on top of which he does have the added benefit of having a nice when attacking inheritable skill, where we get to play 1 level 3 Digimon from our hand suspended for free. So not only is he just acting as a really good tempo card to Digivolve into to get into our Megas right afterward, but he also just gives our Megas the ability to start playing our level 3 Digimon, and that's just very, very powerful because it could put lots of pressure onto the opponent, and we do have a couple of level 3 Digimon we don't mind just hard playing off of this ability. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Blossomon. So Blossomon is in the deck just because it is the primary Digisorption card we're going to be using. So we're going to use this card basically the same as Argomon level 5 to Digisorb to get into our Megas with very efficiently and very easily. And the fact that we do have multiple instances of Digisorption is what's making the combination between Argomon and Blossomon so good to run that you just want to run nothing else. But as far as the other level 5 of the deck, it could really be anything you feel like you want to be using depending on how you build the deck and what types of cards you want to be supporting. Because I'm choosing to take this deck in the continued direction of supporting Digiburst, I am going to be running 4 copies of Lalamon, just because Lalamon is that good of a card to be using with Digiburst because of her own Digiburst ability, where we get to suspend one of the opponent's Digimon by removing 2 of her inheritable sources. So there's just lots of different ways that we could use the card, and the fact that she does have Digiburst is really, really good, and she even has a nice inheritable skill on top of that, where it's a when attacking ability. If we have a Tamer in play, then we get to suspend one of the opponent's Digimon, so we could consecutively and repeatedly attack and rest the opponent's Digimon down, and we could use that to make some very powerful follow-up plays to get rid of that Digimon in various ways with either Nidhogg or attacking into it. Next, onto the Megas, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Nidhoggmon. I almost wanted to go 4 copies of Nidhoggmon just because Nidhoggmon is that good of a card, but I feel like with all of the other cards that I'm going to be running in the deck, 3 copies is just enough. So what this card is doing is he has the very powerful Digiburst 4 ability, so for Digivolving all the way up into him, getting rid of his full stack, we get to suspend all of the opponent's Digimon with 5,000 DP or less in play, and then place all of the opponent's suspended Digimon on their field to the bottom of their deck. So that's just very, very powerful because most of the time we're going to be using this as a big board clear, where if they try to go wide, we could use this to punish them by putting everything on the bottom, or if we could even get rid of just one of their important Digimon, then it's totally worth doing, just because what we're left with at the end of the day is a Digimon that has that 13,000 DP, which is a little bit harder to get rid of than something that's at 11 or 12,000. But the removal ability on Nidhoggmon is just what's making him so good, and we have lots of different ways to line up Nidhoggmon, and the opponent's gonna always have to be in constant fear of us being able to Nidhogg out of nowhere, because we also have the Digisorption ability to easily climb up our stages, on top of us being memory efficient with a lot of our evolutions. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Refleximon. So Refleximon is still a pretty decent Digimon just because her Digiburst ability allows us to have all of our Digimon gain plus 2000 DP, so it even makes our little rookies even more stronger and efficient to be swinging with. And then on top of that, she also has this nice ability where during your turn once per turn, when you use one of your Digiburst abilities, then one of your opponent's Digimon can't attack or block until the end of the opponent's next turn. So this is effectively stun-locking their Digimon from really doing anything outside of activating their abilities, if they even can, and that could be really important because it could stop them from literally using their high-level Digimon to be able to push and aggress, and that allows us to formulate some good counterplays to try to defeat their high-level Digimon with it just sitting on the field, waiting and doing nothing, and we could even pace and tempo this ability out, so we could repeatedly use her Digiburst ability to just keep their Digimon stun-locked at all times. So Refleximon just is another card with a whole bunch of high synergy in the deck, and if we even need to, we could even Digivolve on top of our level 6s, so that way we could bypass certain lines of play and increase her stack, so that way we could use the Digiburst ability over and over again. And then the last mega of the deck is going to be 3 copies of Ancient Troymon. So Ancient Troymon is a pretty decent card. At first, I wasn't super high on the card, but the more I used him, the more I generally ended up liking him, because he has this nice ability where during the opponent's turn, when an opponent's Digimon attacks, you could suspend up to 2 of their Digimon without blocker. So this helps stave off a lot of the aggression if their Digimon is unable to clear Ancient Troymon, but their Digimon can multi-attack. So just being able to turn off their multi-attacking abilities is really, really valuable, because that could keep you in the game longer, on top of the fact that it's suspending up to 2 Digimon without blocker, so if they have anything else on their field, it also will be susceptible to being suspended, so that way we could then clean up with either Ancient Troymon by attacking into it, or figure out a way to quickly Digivolve into Nidhoggmon and punish them accordingly. So he is just another very fantastic card to help control and mitigate what the opponent can do, on top of which he has the ever so classic ability where it's an on-delete ability. We get to play 1 green level 4 or lower Digimon with hybrid in its form from our hand for free. So this is acting like all of the other ancient cards with Ancient Greymon and Ancient Garurumon, so it's no surprise to see this ability here, and we are playing an Argomon to combo off of this card, even though most of the time we do want to use Argomon to Digivolve on top of one of our Mimis, but at worst we could still use it to combo with this ability to try to have a body on board at all times, just because there is a lot of removal in the game. So anyway, we have it to mitigate that as best as we can is always a good thing to do. Next, on to the options. I'm going to be running 1 copy of Hidden Potential Discovered. So, like Argomon, we can only run 1 copy of Hidden Potential Discovered because this card is just that good. It has the main ability where the next time one of our green Digimon Digivolves, we get to suspend one of our Digimon to reduce the Digivolution cost by 5. So, as you can see, Nidhoggmon and Ancient Troymon both have evolution costs of 5, so the fact that we could use Hidden Potential Discovered to basically reduce that to 0 just means that we could get into our megas as efficiently as we possibly can, and even though we are only running 1 copy of this card, it has the nice security ability of being able to add itself into our hand, so even if it is checked in the security, we have the availability to use it as a very powerful zero-costed option card to be playing. And then as far as the only other option card in the deck, I'm just going to be running 3 copies of Needle Spray. I almost was thinking about running 2 copies of Needle Spray and putting that card into a Digimon slot somewhere, but I felt like 3 copies of Needle Spray is still fine, just because we do want ways to be able to suspend the opponent's Digimon down outside of our Digimon. So it's really important to have this card because we could use this to set up a Nidhogg play where we could Needle Spray something, then Digivolve into Nidhoggmon, and then clear their whole field. So that's really important. We could use this in combination with Refleximon or Ancient Troymon to be able to suspend something and attack into it, or just make a free or safe swing. So that's also really important. And then it also acts as some defense in our security because it also has the security ability of activating its main ability and then adding this card to our hand, so that way we could figure out the best time to reuse this card after its security ability activates, which could actually save us from lethal positions because it'll suspend one of the opponent's Digimon down, thus taking away an attack. And then the last card of the deck is going to be the only tamer of the deck, and that's going to be 3 copies of Mimi. So Mimi is still just the best tamer that we have. Not only is she the memory fixing tamer, always setting our memory to 3 if we have less than 3 memory, but she also allows us to turbo our raising area, making it that much more threatening for the opponent when we have a high level Digimon in play. So her main ability states that if we have a level 5 or higher green Digimon in play, we get to suspend this tamer to basically get another raising phase. So that's really important because we could either hatch an egg or move a Digimon out of the raising area, and if we move a Digimon out of the raising area, it's not susceptible to, I guess, summoning sickness, so that way it could attack right away, and that's just very, very powerful because if we just hatch an egg, we could start evoing and get more card draw that way, or we could start trying to aggress and use our raising area to put the opponent in some very bad positions. So no matter what way we spin Mimi, she's just a very good tamer to be using, and she's just really good fodder for Argomon just because once Mimi is all done and used up, and we don't feel like we could use her ability anymore, then we could just Digivolve Argomon on top of her, so that way we could then use Argomon to help push and aggress for the game. And then there's still just a whole bunch of other really good cards that you could run to kind of customize and change the deck to your liking. So if you want to run some different Digitamas, some of the 2 other better Digitamas that we could be working with is going to be Argomon, just to try to gain some memory when we're going to be unsuspending our Digimon during our unsuspend phase, to try to make us a little bit more memory efficient, especially if we're going to be Digivolving into these high-costed level 6s. And then we also have Minomon if we want to try to take a more controlled direction and try to attack into the opponent's Digimon. Minomon is really good because Minomon will let us draw a card for attacking into the opponent's Digimon. So those are 2 very, very strong abilities that we could take advantage of, all depending on how you build the deck. And then as far as other cards to take advantage of, we could take advantage of Palmon from the starter deck because it has this nice generic when attacking ability to just DP boost our Digimon by 2000 for the turn. So it's just another way to try to aggress onto the opponent's Digimon to delete them by making ours stronger than theirs. And then we also have another blocker we could consider running in the deck in the form of Weedmon. So if you do want to split up your blockers and run a different blocker lineup than what I have, then Weedmon is a very fantastic card because the 6000 DP actually is starting to matter more and more versus the 5000 DP, so it has a little bit of extra resilience. And then we do just have some other really powerful inheritable abilities to be playing with on our level 5s. If you do want to just try to Digivolve into Ancient Troymon and take advantage of his ability. So we have Caputerimon to give him some extra DP for every one of the opponent's suspended Digimon down, and then we also have Stingmon. When we delete a Digimon by battle, then Stingmon will gain us a memory. I don't necessarily think that the memory is going to matter that much once we're already in something like an Ancient Troymon, but it's still nice to think about just because it evos for 1. But speaking of other really hyper-efficient cards, we could run Roachmon just because it's a level 4 that hard plays for 3 and evos for 1. We don't care about its low DP because we just want to hard play this card and then Digivolve on top of it right away, so that way we can make some very powerful plays happen. And then if you wanted to, you could even think about taking this deck into a Gargamon approach, where you could really utilize Gargamon's ability to attack and then try to forcibly Digivolve into one of our level 6s for even more benefit. So Gargamon is just another really good card that could spawn his own deck, and you can make some really interesting and exciting plays off of this card and the RNG aspect that he's playing into. And we do have ways of mitigating his RNG with one of our other tamers in the form of Izzy and Mimi, just because they have the same type of ability that Gargamon has, so you could stack and line these up to make very powerful plays happen and try to get his ability off as consistently as we possibly can. But if you do just want to take a slightly different direction with the deck, then you also could play Terriermon as just a card to play that Evos for 2 and is a level 5 blocker with 7000 DP to try to wall out the opponent even further. But if you wanted to, you could run any level 5 that Evos for 2 with a decent ability, because we do have lots of those in green as well. Then you could also run Turopium On, because Turopium On is a level 5 that hard plays for 5, so it's a very tempo efficient card to just hard play if we're going to hard play level 5s, and then you could even take the deck into a more Mega Zoo approach, because we also do have other cards that we do want to hard play for green that are very tempo efficient, and then we could just easily digivolve up into our megas right afterward. So there's just a ton of those that we could be playing, and green just has a whole bunch of other very powerful inheritable abilities that we could be playing around with. Like with Mega Caputerimon, because every time we're going to be attacking into one of the opponent's Digimon and deleting it, then we're going to be burning the opponent's security, and with Ancient Troymon always trying to rest the opponent's Digimon for basically attacking into us, it's going to be very easy to crack back and attack into the opponent's Digimon, and even though Ancient Troymon doesn't have piercing, this is the next best thing. But we do just have a whole bunch of other very powerful level 6s that we could be running in complements to what the deck is trying to do. So Mega Gargamon being able to stun lock and gain security attack +1 is just very, very good for what we're trying to do. And then we also have Bancho Stingmon to take advantage of the opponent's Digimon being rested by him having the piercing ability, and if the Digimon he's attacking into is strong enough, then he's going to gain a huge DP boost and damage boost. But if you are playing like this Gargamon high roll style of deck, then you could just run something simpler like Imperial German in green, just because he natively has the piercing ability and can multi-attack himself. So if he is revealed off of Gargamon, we could digivolve into him. If he's attacking the opponent's Digimon, then the piercing will delete the opponent's Digimon, deal the damage, and then when he deletes an opponent's Digimon by battle, then we get to unsuspend him, so that way he can make a secondary attack, all out of seemingly nowhere. So that's just another really powerful thing that we could be doing with the deck, especially with Ancient Troymon resting up to 2 of the opponent's Digimon down. We could use something like Imperial German as a good complementary mega to try to pick their Digimon off while dealing damage at the same time. But if you do just want to play a little bit more into the Digiburst strategy, then you do have Hercules Caputerimon as a card with piercing and the Digiburst ability to suspend the opponent's Digimon down, so he's getting basically the best of both worlds. And then we do have very powerful level 7s you could be running, so if you want, you could run Eosmon just because the piercing and restand ability is very, very powerful, on top of the fact that he could actually swing into the opponent's unsuspended Digimon, so we could try to bypass a lot of their defenses and to try to pick off their Digimon that way. Or if we just want to run some simple form of removal, then we even have Chaosmon Volderarm to use, just because the minus 7,000 twice could stack up on one Digimon to delete a large Digimon, or we could spread it off on 2 smaller bodies to delete 2 smaller bodies, and his on-delete ability is just icing on the cake. Then we do have some very powerful options that we could run. So one of the more powerful options that we got as of BT-06 is going to be Blasted Disaster. So we get to use this card to suspend all of the opponent's Digimon down and then gain 1 memory for each Digimon suspended. So the more Digimon they have in play, the more we could suspend with this card and the cheaper it becomes. And then when we play our Nidhoggmon, then all of the opponent's Digimon will go away. So that's some very powerful synergy and combo play, on top of the fact that it has a nice security ability of at least suspending one of the opponent's Digimon down, so it's still a pretty decent threat in the security. But if you do want to run something for consistency's sake, then we do have green memory boost to play. Just allowing us to check the top 4 for any green Digimon and add it into our hand is just that good, with the delay ability of it being able to gain 2 memory at a later turn. Could just set you up to make some very powerful plays possible, especially if we are going to be playing a memory fixing tamer, then we'll just always go to 3, then we could use the memory boost to go to 5, and we could mitigate some of our high evolution costs that way. And then I already talked about Izzy and Mimi, but you could run some other green tamers, all depending on what you're actually trying to gain out of the deck. And I do think the only other best green tamer that we have to be thinking about is going to be Ken, because if we are playing into that piercing type strategy, then Ken is just really, really good for that by gaining us memory. But if you want, you could even run a white tamer in the form of Takumi, just to try to help us draw more cards and stave off some of the opponent's aggression on their level 3s by adding a clause where they're going to be losing a memory every single time they attack with a level 3, which is something we're not really doing because we're green and we want to Digivolve more often than swing with our low-level Digimon. But for the most part, green really doesn't change a whole lot as of BT-06, just because BT-06 didn't really add a whole lot of good generic green cards to the overall pool. There is just a couple of cards that you could think about utilizing, all depending on what your end build is going to be looking like, and your end build doesn't necessarily have to be something exactly like this, depending on what cards you have access to and what you actually feel like you want to play. I just think the inclusion of Ancient Troymon in a Digiburst style of deck just adds extra control elements to what the deck was already doing, and it allows us to use some slightly different tools to make some very powerful plays possible because of the added resilience and the added aggression that we could use off of the hybrids and ancients. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and down in the description below are a couple of different ways you could support me and the channel. So I do have a TCG Player affiliate link, so when you use that link to buy cards off of TCG Player, then some of that money will go to supporting me and the channel. I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook, so when you buy a playmat with my design, then some of that money will also go to help supporting me and the channel. And on top of all of that, I do have a Twitch account over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, so giving me a follow and a subscription also helps support me there, and I do play Digimon on top of various other games on that platform as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.